A massive, completely out of nowhere trade just went down in the NBA as the Orlando Magic just traded 4 first-round picks for Desmond Bane from the Memphis Grizzlies. Let's talk about the Memphis part of this because it's super, super interesting. There have been trade rumors around them this offseason, but a lot of those rumors have centered around Ja Morant, who's had off-the-court issues, who's had injury issues. There were questions about whether he was the franchise guy for Memphis moving forward. Jaren Jackson got a lot better. Desmond Bane is a nice player for them as well. And so if there was going to be this kind of a shocking trade in Memphis, it seemed like Ja Morant would be the guy, not Desmond Bane. But all of a sudden, Bane is now in Orlando in exchange for a ton of stuff. KCP, Cole Anthony, 4 future first-round picks, including one 2026 pick from Phoenix, and a future pick swap. And what I think happened here for Memphis was 2 different things. One, I don't think they were necessarily actively shopping Desmond Bane, but Orlando went through their guard options. We're going to talk about Orlando here in a little bit, and they settled on Bane as a guy that they felt like was really going to help them get over the top in the Eastern Conference, and they gave Memphis a ton of value in exchange for him. They forced their hand where they looked at this and said, we have to take this deal. We don't have a choice. This is so much value in exchange for a guy in Bane that, yes, we just signed him to an extension, but you can't pass up a deal like this. And Memphis said, okay, sure, if you want to give us this many picks and a couple of other guys we could maybe flip or just use in KCP and Cole Anthony, we're going to take the deal. I think the other part of what happened here for Memphis is things are obviously changing. No more Taylor Jenkins. They've got a new coach. They ran a new offensive system this year. And Bane was just kind of okay. At times he looked a little bit out of place in the system, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were some internal discussions about, is it time to try and see what the value is out there for Desmond Bane? Be quiet about it, but see what's out there, because whatever we're trying to build here is going to be a little bit more centered around, the Jaren Jackson, Ja Morants of the world, and Bane just isn't as good of a fit. Now, it's interesting because a lot of the spacing issues Orlando is trying to solve are now going to exist in Memphis because Bane was one of the more consistent shooters over the last couple of seasons. But I can totally understand why Memphis made this deal when they did. In terms of grades, we're going to talk about grades later. This obviously grades out really well for Memphis. On the other hand, let's talk about the Orlando Magic. This is an incredibly interesting deal for them for a couple of different reasons. We talked about the fact that this is a team that has needed a perimeter creator and shooter for a while. Anthony Simons has been rumored to go to Orlando for like 2 years at this point. Darius Garland was someone that we talked about on this channel. We've talked about Trae Young on this channel, but what I'm assuming happened here is Orlando went around the league. They asked about Trae Young. They asked about Darius Garland, and either those guys weren't available or they weren't available to Orlando specifically because those teams don't want to trade with Orlando, or those teams just wanted way more than what the Magic ultimately traded away in exchange for Desmond Bane, and they decided that Bane would be their guy. He's a guy from the Western Conference, so Memphis isn't all that worried about trading him to Orlando, and certainly they kind of forced their hand with the amount of stuff that they traded in exchange. Another reason this is interesting for Orlando is one of the guys that they brought in to kind of, get them over the hump was KCP last offseason, a guy they signed in free agency, someone that brought championship experience, two-way potential, shooting, spacing, all that stuff. KCP had a really bad year in Orlando, and just after 1 year, he's gone. He's in Memphis, and he's probably going to be really good for the Grizzlies. And so it's interesting to see this Orlando team continue to try and make shooting and spacing upgrades, and after just 1 year with KCP, they decided he wasn't the guy. And this has been a team that publicly has been pretty transparent about the fact that they feel like this offseason is their offseason to make a move, to try and get themselves into a different tier in the Eastern Conference. And this move certainly showcases that want and that need for them to try and elevate their roster. And I'm sure plenty of people were wondering, why in the world would Orlando do this? Like, this is so much stuff in exchange. Well, there's a couple of different things here. One, it does remind me a little bit of the Mikal Bridges trade from Brooklyn to New York, where you just identify a guy you feel like fits really well in your roster, and you're okay giving up a bunch of stuff in exchange for him because you feel like the fit is going to be just that good, in addition to their desperation to just add anybody on the perimeter that can play make and can shoot. And like I said, some of their options being pretty limited if guys like Garland and Trae Young are not available. Something else I think that's happening here is the contract of Desmond Bane, to me, really, really matters, because Orlando is going to be an expensive team over the next couple of seasons. Franz, Paolo, those guys are both on max deals. Jalen Suggs is making pretty much what Desmond Bane is, and Bane just signed a contract contract extension last offseason that pays him between $35 and $45 million all the way until the summer of 2029. And in this era of second apron and luxury tax and all this stuff, Orlando knows their team is going to be expensive. And if they wanted to add a fourth guy, they wanted it to be a high impact player, someone more high impact than KCP, and someone that fits really well on the roster. And so the contract combination of Desmond Bane, Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, and Paolo Banchero, that's their core four group of guys. And assuming that Suggs stays healthy, they're going to keep him there. And they're all going to be there through 2028, 2029, sign long term. And as the cap continues to go up, these guys' numbers are fixed at what they already are. And so it makes it a little bit easier, a little bit more tenable for them to keep all four of their guys together. Whereas for other teams that don't have their core 3 or 4 guys signed long term, they're going to have to sign them into extensions. Then the number is going to go up. It's going to get harder and harder in the second apron era to keep them. It's not necessarily a reason enough to trade this much in exchange for someone in Desmond Bane that's very good, but not worth this many future first round picks. But from a contract length and expense standpoint, with the way that teams have to be built now, I can totally understand why Orlando decided that the situation around Bane specifically was worth what is very obviously an overpay. They've got their core 4 group of guys. They've got some other pieces they're trying to develop on their roster. And obviously this is their move. It has to be their move, because their draft equity is just not going to be in a place over the next couple of years where they're going to be able to add really anybody else. They're going to have a little bit of flexibility as more future first round picks get added to what they have available. But for the most part, this is what they could do. This was their big move. And it puts a lot of pressure on guys like Franz and Paolo and Jalen Suggs to be healthy, to be good. It puts a lot of pressure on the coaching staff to put together a functional NBA offense, which they've struggled to do over the last couple of seasons, and makes Orlando one of the most intriguing teams in the entire league next year. Moving forward now in terms of grades for the deal, for Memphis, it's obviously an A+++. Again, it's kind of similar to the Mikal Bridges thing, where anytime you get this much value in exchange for someone like Desmond Bane in this case, it's an A++. It's going to be very interesting to me to see what direction Memphis now goes. Are they loading up for some other offer? Are they the Giannis team? Are they the KD team? Or are they just recognizing this as an opportunity to still be pretty good next year? KCP can play in the Desmond Bane spot. They've got all these future firsts, and maybe down the road they trade Ja, they trade Jaren Jackson, and they've got all these future first round picks to do a bunch of stuff moving forward into the future. It's obviously an A+ for them. For Orlando, I'm going to give the deal a C+, maybe somewhere close to a B-, but I'm going to go C+, just because I can understand the contract stuff. I can understand Bane's fit as a shooter and a spacer. Desmond Bane's very good, but it feels a little bit desperate. It feels like a team that just needed to make a move and wanted to go out and get someone, and they couldn't get Garland, and they couldn't get Trae Young, they couldn't get Anthony Simons, or didn't want Anthony Simons, and they landed on Desmond Bane, and ultimately really overpaid for a good player on a nice contract over the next handful of seasons, but not someone that I would have traded all of this. And really what I think brings that grade down for Orlando is that I think this is a package, or a trade package, similar to what they could have tried to get someone like Darius Garland for. Obviously, the circumstances in Cleveland are different. Like, they don't necessarily want to be trading for a bunch of future first round picks because they're still very good, but they could have traded these picks for someone else that maybe Cleveland did actually want. Like, there were options here, I think, for Orlando where they could have been a little bit more patient. They could have held on to these contracts. KCP, Cole Anthony, these guys are going to be on the team next year. They're under contract, and you could have made this move a little bit later when someone became available. But clearly, they understood the situation better than I do in terms of who would actually want to go to Orlando, who would be available, what their options would be, and they decided that this was the perfect fit. And in order to be worth what they just traded away, Desmond Bane has to be the 100% perfect fit in Orlando, and I can't wait to see what exactly that looks like and potentially what other moves this sets up for Memphis this offseason.